"You're overreacting, Lennox. Nothing even happened." That one sentence, spoken so calmly, was the crack that split everything apart. 2 weeks before his wedding, Lennox Vale believed his life was finally in order. At 29, he had a steady career in marketing in Manhattan, a woman he'd loved for 3 years, and a future that felt stable for the first time in his life. Anyone who looked at him would have thought he was the kind of man who had everything figured out. He thought so too until that weekend in New Jersey. The plan was simple: a small family gathering before the wedding, a backyard BBQ at his parents' home where both families could meet, laugh, and blend before the big day. Lennox's mother had spent weeks preparing. She wanted the evening to feel warm and familiar, like a soft introduction to forever. Sienna Marlowe, Lennox's fiancée, arrived looking effortlessly perfect, as always. She carried herself with quiet grace, the kind of composure that made people feel at ease. Lennox still remembered the first time he saw her, how calm she made everything feel. That night, as he watched her laughing with his mother over a tray of marinated ribs, he couldn't help but smile. This was it. His life was finally steady. Finally right. And then there was Kellen Marlowe, Sienna's older brother. Kellen walked in like he owned the air around him, tall, charming, and loud in the kind of way that only men who've never truly failed could be. He talked about crypto, about market corrections and financial vision, as if everyone at the table needed a seminar. He bragged about his Tesla, about networking and future wealth. Lennox's father nodded politely. His mother smiled out of obligation. Lennox did what he always did. He stayed quiet, reminding himself that in 2 weeks, this man would be family. But Briar Vale, Lennox's younger sister, wasn't nearly as patient. At 25, working nights as an emergency room nurse, she had little tolerance for arrogance. From the moment Kellen opened his mouth, she could smell the self-imp. She rolled her eyes more than once that evening, earning a warning look from Lennox. At first, it all seemed harmless. Kellen teasing, Briar brushing him off, Sienna trying to smooth things over with a nervous laugh. But as the evening went on, something shifted. Kellen's comments toward Briar became just a bit too personal, his jokes a bit too pointed. He'd compliment her hair, the way she didn't act like most girls, and the way she could probably handle a guy like him. Lennox caught it. Every word, every glance, and each time he looked at Sienna for support, she just shrugged. "He's just like that," she said quietly. "Don't make it weird." So, he didn't. He forced a smile, poured himself another drink, and told himself that keeping the peace was the right thing to do. After all, the wedding was so close. This wasn't the time for drama. As the night went on, music played from an old speaker, the smell of grilled meat filled the air, and for a brief moment, everything felt normal. His mother danced with his father under the porch light. Sienna's laughter carried through the backyard like a song Lennox never wanted to end. It should have been a perfect memory, and maybe it would have been, if not for what came after. At around 3 in the morning, Lennox woke up. The house was still, the kind of silence that only comes in old homes where every sound feels heavier. He got up, half asleep, to get a glass of water, then he saw it. Someone was slipping out of Briar's old bedroom, shirt half unbuttoned, barefoot, holding a belt in one hand. The air froze in his lungs. The figure turned, and moonlight from the hallway window hit his face. Kellen. Their eyes met for half a second, enough for everything to change. Kellen didn't look shocked. He didn't even look guilty. Instead, he gave a tiny shrug, the kind that said, "Yeah, so what?" Lennox felt something deep and instinctive take over. He stepped forward, grabbed Kellen's arm, and yanked him back. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice was low, shaking, barely under control. The noise woke the house. Doors opened, lights flicked on. His father appeared in the hallway in his t-shirt and socks, his mother right behind him. Then came Sienna, her hair messy, eyes wide, voice trembling. "Lennox, what's going on?" Before he could answer, Briar appeared in the doorway. Her hair was tangled, sweatshirt inside out, face pale. She looked like she wanted to vanish into the floor. Kellen was the first to speak, calm to calm. "Nothing happened, man. Chill out." That tone, the smugness in it, made Lennox's blood boil. He pushed forward, but his father caught his arm before it could go further. "Enough, Lennox." Then Briar spoke, and her words hit harder than any punch could. "It's none of your business who I see." For a moment, the world went quiet. Lennox stared at her, searching her face for something: regret, confusion, anything, but all he saw was shame mixed with defiance. And then he looked at Sienna, waiting, hoping she would say something, anything, that she'd defend him. Tell her brother to stop. Tell him she understood. But she didn't. She just stood there, frozen, eyes darting between them, lips parted but silent. and in that silence, Lennox felt something inside him give way, not rage, not grief, but realization. He understood that love could survive mistakes, but not this. Not silence in the face of betrayal. The rest of the night blurred. His mother begged everyone to calm down. His father insisted they all stay till morning. No one slept. At breakfast, the tension was unbearable. Kellen sat at the table, eating scrambled eggs like nothing had happened. Briar avoided everyone's eyes. Sienna barely spoke. When she finally did, it wasn't an apology or an explanation, just a quiet, exhausted sigh. Maybe we should all just move on. That was the moment Lennox knew something had broken, not just between him and Sienna, but inside him too. He didn't yell. He didn't demand answers. He simply watched her, realizing that the woman he was going to marry didn't choose him when it mattered most. Because sometimes, betrayal doesn't come in lies or infidelity. Sometimes, it comes in silence, soft, polite, and devastating. For 3 days after that night, Lennox didn't hear a single word from Sienna. No calls, no messages. Just silence, the same kind of silence that had already begun to rot everything inside him. He tried to bury himself in work, but his thoughts kept circling back to that image. Kellen in the hallway, unbothered, shameless. Briar's defiant stare, and Sienna, frozen in place, watching everything fall apart and doing absolutely nothing. Then came the text from his mother. Dinner this Saturday. Just family. Let's fix this, okay? Lennox hesitated. Every part of him screamed to stay away, but something, maybe guilt, maybe love, pulled him there anyway. Saturday evening, the dining room felt smaller than usual, though there were only 8 people at the table. His parents, Sienna, Kellen, Briar, and Lennox at the far end, like a stranger in his own home. The food looked untouched. Conversations were forced, full of shallow laughs that didn't reach anyone's eyes. His mother was doing her best, talking about the weather, a new neighbor, anything to cut the tension. But the silence underneath was too heavy to ignore. Lennox's father cleared his throat. We're here because families make mistakes. We talk, we move on. Sienna nodded quietly, eyes lowered. Briar didn't say a word. Kellen smirked like a man attending a comedy show. Lennox tried not to look at him, but Kellen made it impossible. The man radiated arrogance, sitting back with his arm lazily draped over the chair, tapping his fingers like he was keeping rhythm to a song only he could hear. Finally, Kellen leaned forward. So, we're really doing this, having a summit meeting over nothing. Lennox's jaw tensed. His father started to speak, but Kellen cut him off. I mean, come on. Everyone here's an adult. There was no crime, no harm done. People connect. Sometimes there's chemistry, it's not that deep. The air in the room changed. It thickened heavy, metallic, choking. Lennox's mother dropped her fork. His father's hand froze mid-air. Sienna's mother looked down at her glass of wine, pretending she hadn't heard, and Sienna didn't say a thing, not a gasp, not a glare, nothing. Kellen laughed under his breath. Seriously, we're acting like it's 1950. Everyone's too uptight these days. Lennox turned to Sienna, voice quiet but cutting. You're not going to say anything. She blinked, startled, then whispered, Lennox, you're taking this too far. It's embarrassing. Her tone wasn't angry, it was weary, dismissive, like his pain was a child's tantrum. Something in him cracked. He pushed his chair back slowly, the scrape echoing through the room. So, that's it, he said softly. He humiliates my family, disrespects my sister, and your takeaway is that I'm embarrassing. Sienna pressed her lips together, eyes glistening. I just don't want a scene. Lennox almost laughed. A scene? That's what this was to her, a messy, inconvenient interruption before dessert. He turned to Kellen, who was watching him with that same smug, unshaken expression. You think chemistry justifies walking out of a woman's bedroom at 3 in the morning? Kellen shrugged. I think people do what feels right in the moment. Lennox stared at him for a long time, then exhaled slowly. His next words were steady, too calm, even for him. You're right about one thing. People do what feels right. You, for example, follow impulses, and me, I walk away from poison. He reached for Sienna's hand, not to hold it, but to take back the ring she was wearing. The diamond caught the light, shimmering for a brief, cruel second. Then he placed it gently in the middle of the table. I can't marry into a family that treats silence like loyalty, he said quietly. I'd rather stand alone than sit at a table where truth makes everyone uncomfortable. The words landed like glass shattering. No one moved. Even the air seemed afraid to shift. Sienna's lower lip trembled. Lennox, please. But he'd already stood up. His voice was low, almost kind. Don't. It's over. He looked once more at his sister. Briar's eyes were red, guilt flickering behind them. She didn't speak, didn't try to defend herself, but for the first time, she looked like she understood what she'd done. Then Lennox turned and left. No dramatic exit, no slamming doors, just the quiet sound of footsteps fading down the hall. Outside, the night air was cold, sharp against his skin, the kind of cold that woke something honest in a man. He stood on the porch for a long time, staring at the empty driveway, breathing in the silence. Through the window, he could still see them, his parents frozen in place, his mother's hand pressed to her mouth, Sienna crying quietly, Kellen sipping his wine like nothing had happened. It was almost funny, in a cruel way. The wedding invitations had gone out, the tux already fitted, the venue booked. Yet somehow, this table full of people pretending had already buried the marriage before it began. He got in his car and started the engine. The headlights cut through the dark, illuminating nothing but the road ahead. Long, empty, quiet. Back inside, the room slowly came back to life. Sienna wiped her tears. He didn't have to do that, she whispered. Kellen leaned back, grinning. He'll calm down. He's emotional. Briar shot him a look so sharp it almost drew blood. You don't get it, do you? She said quietly. You don't understand what you ruin. You just move through people like their scenery. Kellen's grin faltered for the first time. Their mother reached across the table, touching Sienna's hand. Sweetheart, maybe it's for the best. Marriages built on tension rarely survive. Sienna didn't answer. She just stared at the ring sitting in the center of the table, shining cold beneath the dining light, a small circle of what could have been. That night, Lennox didn't go home. He drove until the city lights blurred, until his phone buzzed with messages he didn't open. He stopped at a quiet overlook outside Newark, where the skyline shimmered like a dream he no longer belonged to. He sat there, letting the silence wash over him, not the kind that hurts, but the kind that heals. He'd lost a fiancée, yes, but maybe he'd also dodged something far worse. A lifetime of swallowing his pride for people who didn't value truth. Sometimes, the cleanest endings are the ones that come with no shouting, no explanations, just the soft closing of a door. End somewhere between the hum of the engine and the cold night wind. Lennox realized something simple. He hadn't overreacted. He had finally reacted just a little too late. Lennox didn't go home that night. He drove without direction, passing empty highways and nameless exits, until the glow of the city disappeared in his rearview mirror. When he finally stopped, the sun was already threatening to rise. It painted the world in that pale, forgiving light that only made the night before feel more real. The ring was still in his pocket, not Sienna's, but his. He turned it between his fingers for a long while before placing it on the dashboard. Then, quietly, he said to no one, "That's done." And it was Dart. And it was Dart in the days that followed. Lennox vanished. He moved out of the apartment they'd shared, the wedding venue, the florist, the photographer, all cancelled within 48 hours. His assistant handled the calls, saying only that the wedding's been postponed indefinitely. Sienna texted him almost every day. Short messages at first: "Can we talk? Please, just 5 minutes." Then longer ones, walls of apologies, explanations, fragments of what-ifs. But every time her name appeared on his phone, he let it fade into silence. He wasn't ready to hear her voice. Not when every part of him still wanted to forgive her. The only person he spoke to was his father, briefly. "You did what you had to do," his father said simply. "Some silences aren't peaceful, son. Some are poison." A week later she came to his office. It was late past 7. Most of his team had gone home. The glass walls reflected the city lights, and the room was so quiet he could hear the hum of the air conditioner. When the elevator doors opened and Briar stepped out, he froze. She looked different, smaller somehow. The defiance that once burned in her eyes had softened into something else. Still, she walked straight to his desk, hands buried in the pockets of her scrubs. "So that's it?" she asked. "You're just cutting everyone off, not answering calls, not talking to anyone?" Lennox leaned back, exhausted. "I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to stop pretending like you're some tragic hero," she shot back. "You act like you're the only one who lost something." Her words hit him harder than he expected. Briar exhaled shakily. "You've always needed to be the good one, you know that, the responsible brother, the perfect son. And when I screw up, suddenly I'm just the mistake that embarrassed you." Lennox's jaw tightened. "That's not fair." "No," she said quietly. "It's not, but it's true." He stood, pacing near the window, struggling to keep his voice even. "You brought that man into your life, Briar. You saw how he treated people, how he treated her, and you still let him in." "I made a bad choice," she admitted, her voice breaking. "But I didn't do it to hurt you." Something in her tone, the raw honesty of it, disarmed him. He turned back, meeting her eyes. When we were kids, she said softly, you used to be my best friend. You'd walk me to school, scare off boys who tease me. I don't know when you stopped seeing me as someone who could make her own mistakes. The silence between them stretched, long and heavy. Finally, Lennox sighed. Maybe I just forgot that you're not that kid anymore. For a moment, it looked like she might cry, but she didn't. She just nodded, took a step back, and whispered, then maybe this is what we both needed to remember, and then she left. When the door closed behind her, Lennox stood still for a long time, staring at the faint reflection of himself in the glass, a man who couldn't decide if he'd lost too much or finally let go. 2 weeks later, Sienna showed up. No text, no warning, just a knock at his apartment door. When he opened it, she was standing there with a takeout bag in her hands and eyes that looked tired in a way makeup couldn't fix. I brought dinner, she said softly. You probably haven't been eating right. He didn't invite her in at first, but she didn't leave, just stood there quietly until he stepped aside. They sat at the small table near the window. She unpacked the food, his favorite, of course, chicken. He hadn't eaten it since the night they got engaged. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The clinking of forks was the only sound. The city outside glowed like a world that belonged to someone else. Finally, she said, I should have defended you. I know that. I was scared, Lennox. Scared that if I said something it would all explode. So I said nothing, and it was worse. He didn't look up. Yeah, he said quietly. Silence is easy. You don't have to pick a side. Her eyes glistened. You think I didn't love you? I think you loved me when it was convenient, he replied. When it didn't require courage. Sienna didn't argue. She just nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. They finished the meal in silence, not angry, not cruel, just two people who had run out of ways to fix something already broken. When she finally left, she paused at the door. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said. I just wanted you to eat something. And then she was gone. A few nights later, Lennox received a text from an unfamiliar number. Kellen, meet me at Marty's diner tomorrow. Need to talk. He almost deleted it, but curiosity won. The next evening, he walked into the small diner off Route 9, the kind of place where the coffee was always burnt and the jukebox hadn't worked since the 90s. Kellen was already there, sitting in a booth, sipping black coffee like a man without a care in the world. Lennox slid into the opposite seat. Wordless, Kellen smiled. You look tired. Rough few weeks. Lennox didn't respond. Kellen leaned forward, lowering his voice. I'm seeing Briar. Lennox's stomach tightened. You what? She reached out, Kellen said casually. We've been talking, getting to know each other, you know. She's smart, honest. I actually like her. Lennox stared at him, incredulous. You don't see what's wrong with that? Kellen shrugged. Two consenting adults. Man, what's the problem? It's not like she's your kid. There was no remorse in his voice, not even awareness. Just that same effortless arrogance. Then Kellen smirked. I don't regret what happened. The only thing I regret is that you caught me. You've always needed control. That's your problem. For a moment, Lennox said nothing. The waitress passed by, refilling their cups. The smell of burnt coffee and cheap syrup hung in the air. Then, slowly, he reached for his wallet, placed a few bills on the table, and stood up. Kellen raised an eyebrow. That's it. No lecture. Lennox looked down at him, calm, unshaken. No, he said quietly. You wouldn't understand one. He turned, walked out of the diner, and into the cold night. Behind him, the door chimed softly, a sound so ordinary yet final. Outside, the air smelled like rain. The streets were slick, reflecting the neon glow from the diner sign. Lennox stood there for a moment, letting the chill bite at his skin. He didn't feel anger anymore, just a quiet kind of clarity. Kellen was exactly who he'd always been, and maybe Briar needed to see that for herself. As he walked back to his car, a strange calm settled over him. He'd lost the woman he loved, the brother he never had, and the closeness of his sister, yet somehow, the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned, for the first time in weeks. Lennox turned the key in the ignition, and the quiet didn't scare him. It felt like peace. The rain had finally stopped by the time Lennox drove out of the city. The highway was slick, painted with reflections of headlights and broken clouds. He didn't know where he was going, only that he couldn't stay in the noise anymore. He passed the sign for Maplewood, the town where he grew up, and something in him loosened. It had been years since he'd gone home for anything more than a holiday dinner. Now, for reasons he couldn't quite name, that small brick house with the creaky porch suddenly felt like the only place left that made sense. It was late when he arrived. The porch light was still on, as if his parents had been waiting for him, though he knew they'd gone to bed hours ago. He parked quietly, walked around to the backyard, and stopped when he saw her. Briar sat on the old wooden bench near the maple tree, her knees drawn up to her chest. The dim porch light barely touched her face, but he could tell she'd been crying. For a moment he almost turned back, but then she spoke, without looking up. "I knew you'd come," she said softly. Lennox hesitated, then sat down beside her. The wood creaked under their weight. The air smelled faintly of wet grass and soil. Neither of them spoke for a while. The only sound was the slow drip of rain from the leaves. Finally, Briar said, "I didn't come here to defend myself anymore." He glanced at her. She was staring straight ahead, hands clasped together tightly. "I've been thinking about that night," she continued, "about what I did, and what I let happen. I kept telling myself I didn't owe you an explanation, but that was just pride talking." Lennox leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Why him, Briar?" she exhaled. "Because he made me feel seen. I was tired of being your shadow, the little sister everyone compared to the perfect brother. I thought if I did something reckless, something that was mine, I'd feel ... free." He didn't interrupt. Her voice cracked. "I forgot that freedom doesn't mean hurting the people who love you. I didn't realize how much I broke your trust until I saw your face that night." Lennox turned to her, his expression softening. "I wasn't perfect either," he admitted. "I spent so long trying to protect you that I stopped treating you like a person. I just wanted to keep you safe, even when you didn't ask for it." She looked at him for the first time that night, tears glistening in her eyes. "So where does that leave us?" He smiled faintly. "Right here, I guess. Trying again." For a moment, she hesitated, then reached for his hand. He took it. No grand apology, no heavy words. Just a quiet understanding between two people who had finally stopped trying to be right, and started trying to be honest. When they hugged, it wasn't dramatic. It was slow, real, and full of everything they hadn't said for years. A few days later, a small envelope arrived at Lennox's apartment in the city. No return address, just his name, written in Sienna's handwriting. Inside was a single Polaroid photo, one he remembered taking years ago at a county fair. They were sitting side by side on a bench, laughing at something out of frame. On the back, in her handwriting, were 7 simple words. "This is what home looks like." He stared at the picture for a long time. Then, without thinking, he pulled out a note card and wrote back, "I still care about you, but love isn't enough when silence becomes betrayal." He didn't send it. He just folded the note and tucked it behind the photo, then placed both inside the drawer of his desk. Some things didn't need to travel any further. That weekend, Lennox was supposed to board a flight to Tokyo for a work project he'd accepted months ago. But as he sat at the airport, watching people rush through the gates, something inside him refused to move. He canceled the flight, grabbed his bag, and booked a train to Boston instead. No one there was waiting for him, and maybe that was the point. The small apartment he rented overlooked the harbor, a quiet, modest place where the mornings were slow and the nights smelled like salt and rain. He spent the first few days doing nothing but walking the streets, reading at coffee shops, breathing. One morning he sat by the window with a mug of coffee growing cold in his hands. The sky was pale gray, the kind that blurs the line between day and night. Seagulls cut across the horizon, and the sound of the waves below blended with the faint hum of the city waking up. He thought about everything that had happened, the wedding that never was, the silence that destroyed it, and the small, painful truths he'd finally learned to accept. Maybe he had overreacted, maybe he'd been too proud. But sitting there, watching the world move quietly outside his window, he realized something. He would rather lose a wedding than lose his self-respect. He lifted the cup to his lips, the coffee long gone cold, and smiled faintly. That night, as the city lights flickered across the harbor, Lennox wrote a few lines in the back of his journal. Not a letter, not a confession, just words he didn't want to forget. Silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes, it's strength, the kind that lets you walk away when speaking would only keep you trapped. Love can survive anger, distance, even mistakes, but it cannot survive when people choose to stand quietly beside what's wrong. He closed the notebook, turned off the lamp, and let the room fall into darkness. The storm had passed, not just outside, but within him. And for the first time in a long while, the quiet didn't hurt. It simply felt like peace. Sometimes, walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom, because no matter how much we love someone, silence in the face of wrong will always sound louder than the truth. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow the channel for more real-life dramas and emotional journeys like this one. Every story here is a reminder. Sometimes, the hardest goodbyes are the ones that set us free.